Uncommitted versus Kamala. The showdown that's supposed to happen. Now, look, a beginning is a very delicate time, and I think it's important for us to talk about what happened. So let's do a little bit of a rewind. Yesterday, we talked about protesters interrupting Kamala Harris, and now there's a fallout because uncommitted voters, you have more delegates than Kamala ever earned. And before anyone says, well, she was with the ticket when Biden was still running, that's irrelevant. It was Biden that people were voting for, not Kamala. So once again, not once but twice, somebody, some entity, has more delegate votes than Kamala ever earned. Here's what happened. And by the way, shout out to Riley Burns. Do not interrupt. Do not interrupt. Do not come. Do not come. Uncommitted leaders to Harris. Voters need to see you turn a new page on Gaza. Uncommitted voters. This is, listen, in case we got the leaders watching this, in just a few short days, you're going to be here in Chicago. I'm going to be watching you guys closely because if you guys go from uncommitted to committed to the Democratic Party, do not bitch and complain when the Democrats turn a cold shoulder to you guys and still allow what's happening in Gaza to continue. She made it very clear what she thinks. Biden has made it very clear what he thinks, and he doesn't even have a functioning brain. Majority of people in the Democratic Party have made it very clear what they think. The politicians have made it clear what they think. So don't be shocked. I'll be watching you guys closely, uncommitted. I will, clearly. So leaders of the uncommitted national movement aimed at pushing the U.S. government to end its support for Israel's assault on Gaza called on Vice President Kamala Harris on Thursday to commit to a policy change and to follow through with her statement made to them in a brief meeting Wednesday. Oh, it's not going to happen. Before her campaign rally in Detroit, that she was open to discussing an arms embargo. It's not going to happen. Lali Aleb and Abbas Alrich, two Michigan voters who co-founded the Uncommitted movement earlier this year, spoke with Harris and Vice President candidate Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, about the deep personal connection many people in the crucial swing state feel to the 2.3 million Palestinians who have been under siege in Gaza since last October. Again, according to the Lancet report, between 186,000 to 200,000 Palestinians could be dead. And that number right now is probably much higher due to unchecked disease, malnutrition, starvation, and people just being blown up, shot at, etc. Albin broke down in tears as she told Harris that she meets with community members every day in Michigan who are losing tens and hundreds of family members in Gaza. I bet Kamala just looked at you blankly and gave a sincere, like, I hear you. I hear you. She doesn't hear you. She doesn't get it. But if you didn't learn the first time, you're never going to learn. So Michigan voters want to support you, but we need a policy. Looks like we got to play the game again. What's the game? What's the game? Now, again, folks, anything can happen between now and when I clip this video because that's what's going to happen. I'm sorry. I got to do it. I guess I got to be a bad guy here again. I got to be mean again. Okay, so look. Fighting for the people, wife, mama, auntie, whatever, all this good stuff. Look at all this, right? So I hear that Donald Trump is finally committed to debating me on September 10th. I look forward to it. You know what I look forward to, Kamala? Here, let's click on this right here. Is there going to be a policy? I see money, asking for money. No policy or platform. But okay, looks like Trump and Kamala are going to debate. That's irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant. Going on to continue, she goes on to say, Michigan voters want to support you, but we need a policy. She doesn't have one that will save lives in Gaza right now. Right now, we need an arms embargo. Will you meet us to talk about an arms embargo? According to a statement released by Uncommitted after the rally, Harris shared her sympathies, thoughts, and prayers, and expressed an openness to a meeting with uncommitted leaders to discuss an arms embargo. Hey, folks, let's have democracy in the chat. You think there's going to be an arms embargo if Kamala were to become president? Type 1 for yes, kid. She hears. She hears you. We are here for you. We here for you. Okay. Or is it at type 2? No, she's not going to do a jack. She's not going to do anything. I wonder how many twos we're going to get in chat. I wonder how many twos will be in the chat. On Thursday morning, however, Harris National Security Advisor Phil Gordon said on social media the vice president does not support an arms embargo on Israel. All right, you got your answer. Uncommitted, and will always ensure Israel is able to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups. Albin and Alwick responded to Gordon's remarks by saying they will continue engaging because people we love are being killed with American bombs. Keep on protesting, but engaging. They've made it very clear what they think. They want your uncommitted support to them, not uncommitted defiance. I'm sorry, uncommitted voters. If you think you have a seat at the table, you're going to change somebody's mind or opinion, you are gravely mistaken. When we told Vice President Harris that members of our community in Michigan are losing dozens and hundreds of their family members to Israel's assault in Gaza, she said back, "It's horrific." That's all she said. "It's horrific," said the leaders of the movement, which includes 700,000 supporters across the country. "It's clear to us that Vice President Harris can lead our country's Gaza policy to a more humane place. We hope she will meet with us so we can move forward to discuss an arms embargo." To the uncommitted voters, I know you're losing friends and family members, but wake up. Stop being stupid. This is not going to help you. You guys are walking into a huge wave of disappointment. But let's go ahead and talk how corporate media is covering it. Let's talk about how corporate media is going to be presenting this, because I'm willing to bet very soon you're going to have people like Rachel Maddow or other jagoffs at BSDNC and CNN starting to talk down to you, uncommitted voters, especially as the convention inches closer and closer to Chicago.
For the first time since she became the Democratic nominee for president, Kamala Harris was interrupted at a campaign rally by pro-Palestinian protesters. Harris responded to the protesters at two different moments, less than a minute apart, during the rally in Detroit yesterday.
I'm here because we believe in democracy. Everyone's voice matters, but I am speaking now. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking.
If you want Trump to win, say that. Uncommitted voters, just like what happened to Bernie Sanders supporters in 2016 and 2020 when they were all painted as straight white males. That's right. Remember that? Or they called us Trump-adjacent supporters? Uncommitted voters, they're going to be calling you secret Trump supporters too. Get ready for that. Get ready for it. You do not have Kamala's sympathies. She's only putting on that mask to trick you to vote for her. I'll be watching what you guys do in Chicago. I'll be paying close attention.
There's a lot of reaction to that. A lot of it had to be about how she might have responded differently or better to the protesters. Although I will note that subsequent reporting showed that prior to the rally, Harris had met with leaders of the uncommitted movement. Those are people that voted uncommitted in Michigan during the primary, a group that's mobilized people to attempt to push the Biden administration away from its support for the Israel war in Gaza. Kamala Harris heard stories of community members losing tens and hundreds of family members every day in Gaza's attack on Gaza, in Israel's attack on Gaza. Since then, there has been a kind of debate about the politics and the strategy of the movement.
So, Javier, you put on something. She is so easy to trigger. I think she's easy to shake up. Like, she is easy to get riled up and get scared. Kamala has failed at every task in regards to being a vice president. And voters, when asked on the street, can they name anything that Kamala has accomplished?
Opposed to the Israeli war in Gaza and the fissures in the Democratic coalition. But to me, there's just a much deeper question here, which is, what is the policy of the Democratic presidential nominee, who is now Kamala Harris and not Joe Biden? And a second question, which is as important, is it even possible to run on a policy different than the sitting president of the United States when you are the sitting vice president? Ben Rhodes served as Deputy National Security Advisor of President Obama. He's co-host of the podcast Pod Save the World, and he's just the person I want to talk to you about all this. I want to start on
Oh, God, Pod Save the World. The terrible name.
that first question, because it is a strange position. I was sort of going back and looking at some of the stuff from, you've got 2000 and you've got 88. George H.W. Bush, sitting vice president, Ronald Reagan. You've got Gore and Clinton in 2000. That's not unprecedented, the sitting vice president running. But on something like this, it just strikes me that the nature of the job of being vice president, in some ways, in a deep sense, your duty is that you kind of can't criticize the president's policy on this publicly or break with him. Or am I wrong? Can you?
No, I think you're right, Chris. I mean, and that this happened in the past. I mean, just to go into the archive, George Bush was the only Republican candidate who supported Ronald Reagan's nuclear arms control treaty, the INF treaty with the Soviet Union. All the hawks were attacking Reagan from the right. The reality is that she's a member of an administration that is carrying out a policy. And so she can have a different policy about what to be doing in Gaza at the same time that she's serving that administration. When she's in D.C., she's in Situation Room meetings. She still works for the President of the United States in her day job, as it were. What she can do, Chris, and I think she's started already to do, is have a different tone. Right. So she can't come out and say, here's my 5-point plan that's different than Joe Biden's. But when she met with Bibi Netanyahu, when she said after that meeting, I will not be silent, the situation in Gaza is intolerable, that's the kind of language that we have not heard from Joe Biden. And I think.
But it's all words. It's all words. She's not going to follow through. God, some of these liberals are so insufferable. Like, how dumb do you have to be? Oh, yeah, she's totally going to help out. She's going to totally help out the people. No, she will not, period. Stop. Pause. I
think even in past months before she was the presumptive nominee, she was using stronger language and calling for a ceasefire and calling out the humanitarian situation in Gaza. So I think the needle that she has to thread is having that kind of different tone that signals a potential change in direction if she takes office. But she can't really come out and say, here's a whole different policy.
Yeah, and I should note that, one of the things that the uncommitted movement folks had said, that they had an exchange with her. She said she was open to meeting. I think the way they phrased it was that she was open to meeting to discuss an arms embargo, which then led to her national security advisor saying the VP has been clear. She will always ensure Israel is able to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups. She does not support an arms embargo on Israel. She will continue to work to protect civilians in Gaza and to uphold international humanitarian law. Which brings us to the next question, which is about the Biden administration, about the end point here. I think it's been pretty clear from the aftermath of the October 7th attacks on Israel that the Biden administration was going to fund Israel, to give them weapons, to support them fully militarily and strategically, while attempting to use diplomatic and political pressure on the Netanyahu government and regional actors to get a ceasefire that would involve hostages being released for cessation of hostilities. And they have really tried. I don't think they've gone through the motions. I think they want it desperately. Today, in the latest iteration of this, Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. announcing they've got a deal that they want to offer in the next few days. Israel says they're going to send negotiators. But it also seems like it's just not going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the lid on the jar is stuck until it comes off. But that theory of the case is now 10 months into this brutal situation. And I just don't know if you think that it's feasible.
I think it's incredibly unlikely, Chris. I mean, the reality is that Plan A has been exactly what you described, plus a kind of Saudi normalization of Israel that could unlock some kind of peace process. Look, the decision makers in those negotiations right now on either side are Bibi Netanyahu from Israel, who can't even stand behind the same Israeli ceasefire position that the administration has lifted up. Every time they get close to a deal, Netanyahu says something that essentially upends the process. And the decision maker, particularly since the assassination of Haniya, the leader of Hamas, decision maker from Hamas is Yahya Sinwar, who's the most militant leader of Hamas sitting in Gaza.
Okay, but is anything going to be done about what Netanyahu's government's going to do or has done? Will the International Criminal Court do anything? Will there be any kind of justice? Will there be any kind of accountability? Unfortunately, I think Bassem Youssef, great comedian, his words will forever haunt the world. Israel's going to get away with this. Why? Well, because they bought a lot of American politicians. Okay, every congressman and woman, because we got to be inclusive here, has an AIPAC babysitter or something adjacent or equivalent to that. You don't see any pushback. You don't see anyone standing up. You don't even hear anything from Bernie Sanders, that irrelevant old ballsack. That's what you don't hear from him. You don't hear anything from Bernie Sanders. And yet, uncommitted voters, a question must be asked to all of you. What are you going to do going forward? How are you going to conduct yourselves at the DNC convention? Because people are going to be asking you questions. People are going to be looking at you. I'm going to be observing you guys thoroughly. Will you actually be, as your name says, uncommitted? Or are you going to sell out and commit yourself to a political party that doesn't care about genocide? That choice is yours. And we do invite you to be on our show. And yes, if we do run into you guys or a counter protest, anything of that nature, we'd be more than happy to interview you as well. But what are you going to do? That's the question. Because I'm going to give you a hint. I don't think anything's going to fundamentally change. Nothing will fundamentally change until people say no more. But if you become subservient to a political party, don't complain when they crap in your bed.